All right, we'll get started, I think. We've got quite a lot to do in our session. So we've got about an hour. I'm Jade Bashford. I work for the Real Farming Trust on a project called Ready Healthy Eat, which is about ready meals to address food poverty. What we're going to do in this session is think about what else your restaurant could do, and particularly what else your restaurant could do in how it relates to community. And we've got 4 brief speakers who have been really innovative and interesting in how they've thought about that question of putting community before restaurant, rather than using the community to meet the restaurant's needs. But it's not all lecture. Really, we want you to think differently about your restaurant and to sort of really get into the nitty-gritty of thinking about the purpose of your restaurant differently. So to begin with, I'm going to introduce some of the ideas, and then we'll have these 4 examples, but then we'll get into some breakout rooms and you can start to think about what that means in your circumstance for you. Okay, so here's the question really, which is, what is the purpose of your restaurant? I think I'll let you answer that in your own mind already. You've probably come with a starting point to that, of what you think the purpose is to your restaurant. And I guess typically you're thinking that the purpose of your restaurant, if it's a typical kind of restaurant, is to make a livelihood for you and the people you employ, and maybe to serve good food. But I want you to think about that the other way around, really, that you're thinking about that in terms of the community meeting your needs. But what happens if you think about that the other way around and you start to think about what needs there are in your community? So that they're not there to meet your needs, the other way around. Not just food needs, but think more widely about what needs there are in your community, because probably you're very well placed to meet some of those, and that if you start to do that, that'll bring more people in. So I want you to think about how you see your restaurant, how else you could see your restaurant, how differently you could see it. You've got a lot of resources there, and if you saw your restaurant with a different lens and saw your community with a different lens, you might be doing something more differently. So supposing you would see your restaurant as an arts centre, what would that be like for you? And what would you do? Maybe just on a Tuesday morning when the restaurant's dead. Or supposing you saw your restaurant, first of all, as being an education centre, that the food's secondary, that you use food to do the education. What would that be like in your restaurant? What would you be doing? Maybe not even food education. What would happen if you used your restaurant as an education centre? Or if your community saw your restaurant as a community centre, not as a restaurant? What would that be like? What would happen? I love this picture. This is from one of our partners in Belfast. Most of the people who use that cafe there have learning difficulties, including some of the people that work there. And that works really well for them. So supposing you saw your restaurant as a provider of social care, what would you do differently? Because probably there's a load of people who live within walking distance of your restaurant who aren't coming because they perceive barriers before they come, of communication or physical access or something like that. Supposing you use food to deliver social care, how would that change your restaurant and who would come? Or if you saw the purpose of your restaurant as addressing hunger. So the top picture you're familiar with, I expect. A familiar scene in the supermarket. You go in the supermarket, you buy yourself some food, you buy a bit more, put it in the basket for the food bank. But there are restaurants starting to do that as well. You might have heard about it. So you go in, you buy yourself a meal, but you buy one for someone else and you leave a ticket. And here they do it in the form of a post-it. And then if someone comes in who needs food, they take the post-it. What happens if you see yourself, your purpose as addressing hunger in your community? You've seen the statistics, no doubt, even in a relatively well-to-do area, there'll be people who are skipping meals at the moment because they can't afford to pay for them. What if you see it as your purpose to do something about that? Or if you see your purpose as turning food from a really good farm into a product that sells, rather than seeing the farm as your supplier, what if you see yourself as providing a service to them because they're doing something really good? Or to take it a step further, as Sophie has, as your job being to find a home for waste food, because you're very well placed to do that, and there's a lot of waste food. What happens if you see your restaurant as a living room for people who need one, or people who need to get out of the house? How would that work for you? Can you see your restaurant in that way? Or as a workplace? That's not really novel, but what about a library? What if the main purpose of your restaurant was a library that happened to serve food? Not necessarily for books. What do people in your community need that they could borrow from you that would bring them in? This picture is actually not from a restaurant, it's from a community garden, but that community garden, the purpose is to be as a place of investment for local people who put in fairly small shares, affordable shares or loans. And then when the garden makes a profit, the money comes back to local people. So what if you see your purpose as a means of generating interest or profit for local people? How would that help you? Or as a health promotion centre, you've probably thought about the quality of the food you're serving. What if you think about that a bit more widely in terms of mental health? Now, you're probably already doing this to some extent, but not really conscious of it. What if you see your restaurant as doing something about mental health or physical health? You probably wouldn't have to make enormous changes for your restaurant to do something about loneliness. Maybe you just have to change the seating or have a singles morning. What if you did a pop-up service in places where there's no provision, that you go out in the evening to a rural area or an estate near you where there isn't a cafe or a takeaway, and once a month you do a community meal? What if you start to think like that, that your purpose is to try and address loneliness? Or the original coffee houses, you probably know it, that Charles II tried to get them shut down because they were so radical, because people from different classes met and talked about political ideas, which actually spawned all kinds of interesting things like the stock exchange and Sotheby's. What if you see your restaurant as a place where people debate? Okay, so we're going to have 4 speakers now, just very briefly, and they've all done something pretty genius with what they're doing. So that in some cases, the restaurant's almost secondary to what they're doing, because really they're using food to do community work, and it's working well for them. So the first one, the first person we're going to have is Sophie, who's an absolute genius of community development, who's running a community cafe in London. And she's done a really brilliant job of understanding what people nearby really need, of listening carefully and then doing that thing. So Sophie, would you like to tell us what you're doing at the Hornbeam?
Yeah, great. I'm just going to share my screen as well. Bear with me. Okay. Can everybody see that all right? Yeah, great. So this is a picture of the Hornbeam community space in Waltham Forest in London. And we're a community centre that's been around for almost 30 years now. And we've also got a strong environmental aspect to the centre. And we're community-led, and we work really collaboratively with other community organisations in the borough. And a big chunk of the work that we do here, in fact, the majority of it, is community food projects in various forms. Projects that aim to kind of combat food waste and try to address food poverty in Waltham Forest. So Waltham Forest is, pre-COVID, it was the 7th most deprived local authority in London. And so what we've tried to do is, by trying to combat food waste and food poverty, we're also aiming to bring people together and building community in that way. So there are multiple facets to what we're doing. But the biggest thing is that we've set up a food redistribution network, which basically just redirects surplus food to local community food hubs. And when I say surplus food, I mean food that, like, quality produce, mostly fresh produce that would otherwise get sent to landfill for whatever reason, usually supermarkets, like chain, like orders falling through, that kind of a thing. There's a huge amount of food waste. You just have to look into the figures for that to be so, yeah, quite shocked. And we work with local community food hubs. And by hubs, we mean pop-up food stalls outside of housing estates run by residents. We mean community kitchens who bulk cook food for local residents for free. We mean food cooperatives that have set up. And we're really trying to break down stigma and barriers to accessing support. So, for example, reframing food aid as food waste reduction, where a person is a benefactor of a service rather than a beneficiary. But the community food activity I'm most excited about, and that I'm going to highlight here, is our community cafe at the Hornbeam, which is a collaboration with a group called the Gleaners. And this is a pay what you feel cafe, which uses surplus food almost entirely to make tasty vegan plant-based meals for the community. They're running as a workers cooperative, so everyone who is employed by the Gleaners is getting equal pay and has equal decision-making power. They're also largely volunteer run in the day-to-day, and currently, as kind of emergency response to COVID, we're serving about 80 meals per day from the door as takeaways. And with this community cafe, we're really working to break down the difference between who is a volunteer, who is a paying customer, and who is a non-paying customer. And the vision is to build an inclusive, mixed community eating space, which is socially, economically, and ecologically sustainable in the long term. So yeah, there's some images there of the surplus food we provide. There's also a little, that bottom right hand side is just an example of how we have a sliding scale for some of the produce. So we have a suggested donation or suggested rates for whether you're employed, unemployed, or you want to pay a solidarity rate. And then the final model that we have is an online subscription service where people can buy a monthly subscription in exchange for tasty meals or house-made products. And this is again based on this model of solidarity, where it's designed for those people who can afford to pay more for their food so that others can pay less. And this will hopefully keep this model sustainable in the long term. Yeah, that's mostly it. So I'm going to leave it at that and come back.
Thank you.
Let me stop sharing.
Brilliant. Thanks, Sophie. That was really interesting. So I'm going to go to Greg now. I know quite a lot about what Greg does. Personal interest in that. So Greg runs an organic canteen, which is seen by the people who live around as their community centre, because he's engaged very well with helping them to use the space to do their own thing, which has actually helped the business to do well. So when the breweries needed finance, for example, it's done a very successful crowdfunder recently, and lots of people around about kind of feel like it's their space, which has been very helpful. Greg, would you like to tell us about how that's worked using the breweries community space?
Yes, hi everybody. So yes, we're primarily a brewery, and most of our sales is to pubs and independent retailers. But by far our biggest customer is our own bar, and that's become sort of increasingly important to us. Of course, you know, as makers of beer, we love creating tasty things to drink, but actually, you know, for all of us, the reason we get out of bed is because we love drinking and meeting other people, and we recognize our bar as a great place to get together, and that's where you know, that's where we meet our community. It's our identity, and it's also our opportunity to sort of influence change in the world. So it's really quite important to us. In terms of, you know, our bar, like any good pub, we recognize ourselves as sort of a community center. we have a policy around sort of sourcing organic and all local products. So we really champion our local suppliers and trying to raise their profile within the people that come to visit us. We're also a B Corp. I don't know if anybody's heard of B Corp. It's an accreditation that looks at sort of our social and environmental performance. And one of the places that we scored quite highly was our involvement with community. And when we talk about B Corp, they don't really talk about shareholders, but stakeholders in the business, and really recognizing that the stakeholders are our suppliers, our customers, our community, our staff. Everybody has a stake in the business, and it's those relationships that are important. So, when for our venue, we do our very best to try and engineer opportunities for people to get together and actually meet. And it's surprising the number of times that people come down and actually meet their neighbours for the first time. And it's by our seating arrangements, long tables. Often when it's crowded back in the day, and you could jump and share on the table, people were meeting each other in a way that they don't do through sort of normal means. And the opportunities to meet are reduced. So we really see the value of getting people together. The other thing that we do is actually look at events, the ways that people come together over a shared experience, and again get to meet the neighbour. One of our most successful events is a hop club, and again, one of our community. We brewed a beer using a homegrown hop, and very quickly our supporters community started growing hops in their own gardens and allotments and pub gardens. And every year we bundle the whole plant, bring it down to the brewery, and pick those hop cones off. And again, meeting people over a shared event. It's doing some good for our business. We end up making a beer out of it, and people contributed to that beer. So looking at all the sorts of opportunities to bring people together over an event. We often get requests to use our space for different community events, sort of charitable events or art exhibitions and things. And quite often we do those for free. The space isn't it's not sort of a business use, but we like to see the space used. So lots of activities, whether it's art exhibitions, say a charity bingo raising money for local wildlife, all sorts of things. So we never say no really to anybody who comes with an idea, as long as it fits in with the space. And people really value that as a resource. And I suppose one of the things that really does create community is indebtedness. And right from the start, we've raised finance through our local community. So a small handful of friends. And even in our growth, we did an informal interest-paying loan. We've just moved recently, and we raised £300,000 through a community bond that was managed by Triodos Bank. And then again, more recently, during sort of COVID, we've been really struggling. Our bar's been shut, all our pub customers have been shut, and we did a sort of pay it forward crowdfunder, and raised over £100,000 in less than 3 weeks, which again just gave us the confidence that we have that local loyal fan base who really want us to come through and succeed. So that was really reassuring and a measure of the sort of community support that we have. So we're not super unusual, but I think we're very open to receiving community, and that's really we really recognise that relationship as one of mutual support. We're sort of providing a space, and we really value the people that you come and use our space. So really, to conclude, it's a venue that we use to enable exchanges of experience and sort of shared endeavour. I think recognising that indebtedness is a really valuable way of building community, and we're not afraid to do that. And also, we feel really lucky to be connected to this place and the people that, around us. We feel very much part of our community.
Great, thank you, Craig.
Okay.
So I guess the sort of an easy win for probably nearly everyone here, if you want a restaurant, is to recognise that you've got an asset in your space that's really valuable, and to let people come in and use it to do the toddler group or the lunch for over 60s or the art therapy group or whatever it is, to encourage that kind of use in the daytime when your restaurant isn't busy is very valuable to the people around you and probably good for you too. All right, so the final speaker is interesting because she doesn't run any kind of catering business really. Her main interest is running a community centre and a community group. But I thought it'd be really interesting to have Josie along to talk to us because even if you're in your restaurant not very competent and skilled about doing community development work, you can do something like has happened here because there's a group that are very good at doing the catering who have made a partnership with Josie and her group who do the community work in a community centre, which I think would work for other people as well. If you don't want to do the community work yourself or the care work, see if you can make a partnership with somebody else who can. Josie, would you like to tell us about the arrangement you've got with your ready meals?
Yes, well, I'll share my screen if I can. Oh, I can't. Okay, that's all right. I was going to show some photos. So yeah, I'm part of a community hub.
You should be able to share it now.
I don't know. Okay, I've just got some photos. I thought it'd be easier with some photos. Hang on a minute. Just got to. Yeah, I'll just do this. Do it. Okay. Yeah. So yeah, we set up this community hub since the last year, but obviously a lot of our visions for it are on hold because of COVID. But the thing we have done is in this first little porch here is set up a community food hub, which has it started off with a freezer of love, and I don't know if you've heard about freezers of love, but the long table, which is also in Stroud, provides. They cook frozen meals. They cook thousands of frozen meals, which they distribute via various, I think it's 20 freezers of love around the county. And so we go and pick them up once a week from the long table and put them in our freezer. And then anyone can come along and take food from the freezer, and they either pay for it or they don't pay for it. Nobody knows who's paid what, or if anyone's paid at all. Payment is by cash or by text or online. So there's no shame involved in taking meals. There's no differentiation between those who pay and those who don't. There's no vouchers. There's no assessment, nothing like that. So it's really based on trust and generosity of spirit and the belief that we actually all want everyone to eat well. Nobody wants there to be people going hungry in their community. It's a shocking thought to have that everybody would be. The long table who make the meals, their sort of underlying, their sort of strapline, if you like, is what if everyone in our community had access to great food and someone to eat it with. At the moment we're a little bit scuppered in terms of eating together, but the principle of us looking after each other by offering food is there. And the other thing, that's the freezer of love. We also have now a fridge of love, which has fresh food that we pick up from the farmers market at the end of the farmers market every Saturday. And part of that is food that is donated by people who buy some extra thing off the farmers market and put it in a basket in a fruit and veg shop. In the same way that people buy extras for the food bank in the supermarket and put it in the trolley at the back. So people can now do that at the farmers market, and that supports local businesses, local food businesses. And it's also a way of people, being able to buy healthy food for people who can't otherwise afford to shop at the farmers market. And we also collect the surplus food from the farmers market stalls, the food that they didn't sell that day, which would otherwise be wasted. So we're reducing food waste and increasing the availability of really good quality food for everybody. So yeah, I think that's all I need to say. Oh, actually, I was going to show, so this is our freezer. These are the the meals. They come packaged like that. There's vegetarian, vegan meat options. This is how the payment scheme, just and that's the fridge we've got, packed full of food from the farmers market, and we've also got some dry foods as well. So yeah, that's basically how it works.
Thank you, Josie. So for those people here who want a restaurant and doing the community development work, and particularly addressing food poverty is not your thing, it's actually quite a skill and there's a lot of work sort of reaching out to the people who might use those services. The easy one is what you're good at, is making the ready meals. And then the people who distribute that, who are good at that part of it, just have a freezer. And it actually pays for itself quite comfortably if people pay what they feel. Very often people find that you end up with more money in the tin than you actually spent making the meals. So that's an easy little device for a quite ordinary restaurant to have a go at. All right, so finally to Sue, who's really the exemplar of taking things to the extreme of using food as a vehicle to deliver other help and care.
So I'm Sue, but work here in Edinburgh. I work for a third sector organisation that's been going for kind of over 50 years now. We are predominantly known as a homelessness charity, but sort of over 20 years ago, they made a decision, whilst there'd always been lots of food in the various but work that we did, there had never really been a really conscious effort to concentrate on food. And so they started off by getting the franchise for But Fair Share in But Central Scotland. And then a few years after that, but the food education came on board, because what they found was a lot of the volunteers who were working in the Fair Share depot were not wanting to take home but the fresh produce. They were tending to take home the things like the ready meals and the tins and things like that. But when they spoke to them, it wasn't because they didn't have time to cook or they were lazy to cook or anything like that, but they didn't know how to cook. They didn't have the skills. And so that's when the food education side was actually born, as it were. And so we spent many years running cooking classes. Also, a good few years ago, we had a couple of food book conferences, and we asked people, what does food mean to them? And what came out was not just the actual ability to buy food or to have access to food or to know how to cook it or so forth, but actually the ability to sit with somebody and enjoy that food. And from this prior experience, we know that cooking and eating together is like the glue that holds society together. And because when we sit together and we eat together, people who in kind of other contexts might not open up and share their problems will often do so around a table. We also know that kind of 80% of people who attend our cooking classes are still in their tenancy a year later, despite the fact that when they came to us, their tenancy was actually considered at risk. Cooking for kind of others, sharing food in most cultures is seen as an act of love. Food, the making and the distribution of it to those in need has strengthened the community relations, we found, and has built actually resilience. And so we had a network of the community cook clubs, but to address these issues, to address food insecurity, to address the dignified access to a good, nutritious food, and also to address those issues of loneliness and social isolation that people were feeling in their communities. And this is kind of all the things we did pre-COVID. We also, whilst we don't have a restaurant as such here, we used to have twice a month, we used to have a pop-up restaurant where we had the two local Syrian refugees would come and cook. We would sell tickets on Eventbrite, and we'd have a pop-up Syrian restaurant here, which was hugely successful. It was really hard to get a ticket. The phones would be going, please, are there any spare tickets? But we could only fit actually 25 people in here. Obviously, COVID comes along and we can't do any of that. So kind of overnight, we turned our kitchen into a food production kitchen. And by the beginning of September, we had produced over 80,000 meals, which we distributed to people who would needed the food during the time. But some of those were, a couple of hundred of those a week were kind of individual doorsteps. We had 58 volunteers who helped us to do this. Many of them were actually new to volunteering, and many of them, surprisingly to us, actually fed back to us that whilst to start with they just wanted to help, it was an altruistic thing. When they actually looked at it, they felt actually guilty, some of them, because they had enjoyed themselves so much. And they said it helped them with their mental health. But that was really surprising to them, because I suppose a lot of their friends at the time were on furlough, they were stuck inside, they didn't have sort of activities and purposeful things but to go and do. Whereas these people said to us, they felt like they had a purpose. And actually many of those volunteers were chefs as well who were on furlough. So they'd come and help us actually cook the meals. And we obviously learned an enormous amount from them. And they learned an enormous amount from us. And actually one of those chefs is still with us. And he is now our trainer for our trainees on our Real Farming Trust project. But obviously we didn't want to continue just to hand out meals. We wanted to get back to that where we were bringing people together to meet each other and to get skills and so forth. And so we started a recipe bag project where we send out recipe bags out into the community to families, to students, and kind of everything that is needed to cook the meal is in the bag. And we have a little video on YouTube every week that people can tune into and learn how to cook whatever it is. And we have worked with 105 families and 71 students over this time. About 50% of the food comes from fair share. And this translates into saving from actually waste about 2,443 kilograms of food. And it's all about a dignified access. We don't ask people, are you employed, how much income you earn, or anything like that. It's about people in the community seeing as this is a worthwhile activity to be taking part in. It's not just an activity if you're hungry or you're food insecure. And so what could you as restaurateurs do? So from our experience, we know that if you could provide, and I think a few of these things have already been said, it's things like providing space, but for communal activities when you would not normally be busy, or perhaps when you would be closed. It's about conducting educational engagement, especially with kids. We've had some wonderful feedback about kids who, who wouldn't eat kind of any vegetables before, who are now really enjoying things like, beetroot and couscous and beans and things like this. But most of all, it's about thinking about what you can do to commit, but to tackling food insecurity in a dignified way. Because we have a system at the moment that is only working for a small number of people, and we really need a system change. And in order to have a system change that will address things like the rise in food bank use, but the increasing health inequalities, we really need a collective action to sort this out. And you as restaurateurs are in the perfect position to help the third sector organizations and help people in your community, but to address the system change. That's all I have to say.
Thank you, Sue. Yeah, just really inspiring, sort of decades of really good work there. And there's an interesting bit of conversation going on in the chat about whether you need to be incorporated as a not-for-profit organisation to start to do some of this work. And I think Sue was starting to indicate otherwise. And I think I'd agree with Sue. And Greg, of course, is an ordinary for-profit business. I think that Sue and the other speakers sort of suggested lots of things that you can do as a private for-profit business to start to make it easier for people to sit around a table together, or to experience new food, or to feel welcome in places where they previously felt unwelcome, or to begin to share your cooking skills and so forth alongside the sort of for-profit work that you're already doing. And I think very likely having a kind of sense of ownership around your restaurant and a sense of welcome and being seen to be helpful to community will actually improve your business proposition as well. That's my guess. In a minute, we're going to go into breakout rooms. So I'll pose you the question. I'm going to share my screen so you can see the question for the breakout rooms. So here's your question. I don't think you're going to be able to see this question once you get into your breakout rooms. So maybe try and remember the part of it that's interesting to you. So it begins with, what would happen if you saw your restaurant differently? If you saw the purpose of your restaurant differently? What would happen if you saw the purpose of your restaurant differently? To see it, for example, as an educator, or as a provider of social care, or as a community space, or as an environmental solution, or something else, an experiment in community democracy. What would happen if you saw your restaurant purpose differently? That's the question for the breakout rooms. And really, I want you to think about your own situation and whether there's anything new that you can extend into from where you presently are. Joy, are you there, Joy? Can you talk to us about how we're going to get into the breakout rooms and how we're going to get back again?
I'm just press a button and it'll say you're going to breakout rooms, so you agree, go into your rooms,
Yeah.
and then you tell me how long would you like.
Can you bring us back for the last 10 minutes, Joy, which will give us about 10 minutes or so? Is that okay?
Yeah, no problem.
All right.
Good luck.
So have one last answer to the question before Joy sends us away, okay? A quick read through and then hopefully we'll find ourselves in groups of 4 in a moment.
I will be back in the main room if you have any problems.
Okay, thank you. Okay, we ready now? Do you want to press the button, Joy? Thanks for helping us.
Have you received that? Sarah, can you hear me?
Don't know about Sarah, but I'll put
Well, I've put you in the breakout room and me and someone called Sarah who's not answering. I wonder if Sarah wants to be in a different room. I can move her, can't I?
You can. She may have popped off a cup of tea or something if she's not
Yeah,
answering.
she's not answering at all.
Or she might be trying to answer and might have forgotten that she's on mute still. But just to say, Joy, thank you so much for jumping in. It seems like you're under control and they're under control. I've actually got to jump off and support another session. So
Okay, that's fine. The only thing I don't know is Jamboard, but I assume I just post the link and then they do it.
yeah, exactly that.
Well, she's already posted the link, hasn't she?
Yeah, so the Zoom will still be live, so they can still hear you talking, but they'll be looking at a browser window, browser tab, and then at some point you'll say, okay, now you put your post-it notes on, it's time to come back.
Okay.
Something like that.
Something like that. Okay, fine. I'm sure it'll all be fine.
Yeah. All right, see you later, Joy. Thank you so much.
Okay, no worries. Bye. Welcome back. I'm sorry, Ewan, I noticed you were in a room by yourself. Sorry, you're muted.
I thought somebody might come in a minute, and I was waiting, and then I started writing, then I appeared, so it was good.
Sorry, I had to move you very quickly.
No worries at all. Yeah, we had a really good chat about all our different experiences with community spaces and community hubs, and how we've used them or worked with them. So it was really good catch up.
Right, in theory, we're all back. We seem to have lost one group, but never mind. We'll carry on. All right, so we're going to finish in a minute. So we're just going to finish with a Jamboard that might or might not work. So what I want you to do in a minute is to hang on. If I share my screen, I can show you it. There. Can you see that? All right. Yeah, okay. So in a minute, I'll give you the link so you can get onto this page as well. And you can make a post-it. Look, if you have a look what I'm doing here, if I click on that one, I get a post-it. And I can type on I can choose the color of my post-it if I want to. And then I can type on my post-it. And then when I click save, it goes onto our shared board. You don't want to write too small, else we won't be able to read it. And if we run out of space, look, you can go onto a new page like that, or I will. So the question I want you to answer when we get on here, and you can do several post-its each if you want to, is what does an ideal restaurant look like? You might include some of your new ideas. What might you add to make your restaurant more ideal? So we'll just stick them all up on there, and then you can see what everyone else has done. You can make them bigger. If they're too small to read, look, you can make them bigger like that. And you can move them around if you want to put yours next to somebody else's because they're similar, then you can. All right, so I'm going to stop sharing. Oh no, I'm not going to stop sharing. I'm going to leave it there. But what you need to do is not try and get onto here. You need to get onto the link, which I'm going to show you now. I'm going to put the link in chat here. It's already there, actually. Let's put it there.
I've just done it for you.
Oh, lovely. Good. All right. So what you need to do is click on that link, and then you'll all get onto the same Jamboard and you can all see each other's post-its. If it doesn't work, which it might not if you're on a phone, then you can just put your answer in chat and we'll see it there instead. We've got Joy. If you've got queries about how it works, you can put in chat and ask Joy for some help if you're stuck. Oh, it looks like it's working fine. Oh yeah, look at that, they're flying on. I just want to say we're going to get cut off in about 5 minutes. So if anybody does want to unmute themselves and comment on what's coming up here, then just go ahead. That's fine.
I just wanted to comment, Jade, that lots of people have said that inclusivity is a big thing.
So if we can't hear you,
Oh, sorry,
it's a bit muffled.
I was just saying lots of,
That's better.
is this better? Yeah?
Yeah.
I was just saying lots of people have commented about it, the ideal restaurant being really inclusive. And yeah, whatever that means in different ways. But yeah, that seems to be something really important for most people.
Yes, I agree. All right, I'll close. So I want to say a big thank you to Joy. Thank you very much for helping us out, Joy. And thank you to the 4 people that spoke. Very nice to meet the people we met today.